Hi, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar organized by JetBrains. I'm Paul Everett, JetBrains Developer Advocate, and I'll be your host. The topic for today's webinar is 10 reasons you'll love PyCharm even more in 2021. I'm joined by my friend, your friend, Python's friend, Michael Kennedy, known for the Talk Python podcast, the Python Bytes podcast with Brian Ocken, his excellent Talk Python training video courses, excellent meaning excellent, and numerous other collaborations and initiatives, both big and small, some that you see, some that you don't, but they all impact your Python life. Welcome, Michael.
Paul, thanks for such a kind welcome. It's always great to be here on the JetBrains channel.
Michael and I, beginning the ad libs, Michael and I were talking in the warm up a little bit about how many times I've done webinars. I've been at JetBrains for 6 years. This is like my 50th webinar, and I think this is probably Michael's 7th webinar. And in December, he set the all-time JetBrains record with a webinar. And then I realized Michael has done a few of these over the years. Michael, take a guess. How many YouTube things have you and Brian and you by yourself done?
Oh my gosh. We started doing the podcast live stream with the audience, and it's so great. I see, comments from like Catherine out into the audience, and it's so fun.
Oh, hey, Catherine.
And I would say we've probably done 100 this last year.
Just in a year. What numbers are you at on both of those?
For Talk Python, it's like 340, and Python Bytes is 260-ish. I think that might be the last one. Yeah.
You make me feel so inadequate. You make well, actually, let me put you on the spot. You've done a lot of podcast material this year with lots of people, some of the superheroes like the one you just did with Guido and Mark Shannon about CPython speedups. What's a topic, we'll say it's this year, what's a topic that, or a guest that you brought in or covered that really stood out for you in some fresh, exciting, today I learned something kind of way?
Sure. It might be the very last one I did, actually. We've had so many that are fun, and they're all kind of in their own unique world. But I did this one with Jay Miller, 10 tips and tools for developer productivity. And we just went back and forth like, oh my gosh, have you seen this? Yes, that's amazing. I haven't heard of that, but check this thing out. It was just, so much excitement of like, oh, here's 20 new things we can go run around and try out. And I love it.
And goodness, Jay is great for that kind of thing.
Yeah, he's got so much enthusiasm.
Yeah. That's a good word for it. That should be his middle name. We're going to get him to change his middle name to enthusiasm. Right. And Catherine, we will most certainly take the challenge that you just laid down in chat. You make a living selling courses. I've long admired you and others about kind of being the good folks, kind of independent content creators, actually selling things to actual customers and thriving. So how's business?
Business is good. I mean, after this, I'm going to go kick off some Black Friday sale. So that's always a good time. But, Python is becoming so popular that a lot of people need to learn it. There's the joke, like the t-shirt joke. It says, I learned Python. It was a great weekend, which I think is really funny, right? And yet here I find myself, many years into this, still spending all day learning Python every day. So I think there's this interesting gap between people just kind of like, I can kind of make the language go versus I understand all the libraries. You're going to show us something with Fast API later, right? Like that's a whole world in and of itself that is amazing, right? And so there's so much exciting stuff happening, especially now we've moved on from Python 2. We've got all the async and the typing stuff that are having interesting impacts. So it's good, it's exciting, and there's always a lot to talk about.
Indeed. And we have a tendency to look at where we are and look around and say, wow, Fast API and then all this great. This really feels like a golden age of Python, even though we may, oh my gosh, this is going to kill us, or we got this big hole in the story. And I'm one of the people doing the Black Swan thing as well. But doesn't it feel like the next few years are going to be great?
I think they're going to be great. Yeah. I mean, there are holes. Like I'm not going to go build a mobile app with Python anytime soon. I wish I could, but that there's so many things that people are doing. And I think one of the real strengths is Python draws people who don't consider themselves traditional software developers.
Yes.
And there's just all these different specialties coming in, right? Architects, economists, biologists, and they find Python amazing, and they bring these fresh ideas. And I think that's very
Sure. In fact, I was talking with someone over the weekend about, oh, why would I do typing in Python? If I want typing or I want Python, I'll just switch to another language. And I thought, okay, for every one of you, there's 100 other folks who started programming yesterday.
Yeah.
Today you're going to cover.
They don't want to go to somewhere other than Python. They're just learning that. Yeah.
That's exactly right. And that was my pitch to this person was, what if in the next 3 to 5 years, maybe with Mark and Guido's CPython speed ups or whatever, what if we could extend a little bit further how far you can go in Python without falling over the edge?
Yeah. We'll get there.
We'll get there.
Five times faster. That's going to make a big difference.
I completely agree. It only takes a little bit more to get fast enough to extend that runway before you have to go switch.
And we got Sam Gross's work on the parallelism, and you multiply
that's
those
the one
together.
I'm really interested
in.
I
mean, I got my 10 core MacBook here, and I can only really get more or less 1 core out of it, but I want 10.
Hey, today you're going to cover PyCharm tips largely from your effective PyCharm course. I'm going to flash up in a second a screenshot of it. You just updated it for effective PyCharm 2021. What kinds of things got a new coat of paint?
Everything got a refresh. I think there's both a refresh of the PyCharm features, but there's also a refresh of sort of the zen of the way of working, right? Like, a lot of the libraries, a lot of the tools, right? Like the way, I don't feel I need to explain virtual environments to people anymore. Like people just know, where I feel like in the early days it was, well, here's what a virtual environment is. Here's why you need it. I think some of these techniques and these ways of working are becoming more common. And then, the most exciting one is probably code with me. If I worked on software teams more frequently, I would be extremely excited about that. But, I don't as much, so
sure
I don't get to use it as much as I'd like.
Sure, that team inside JetBrains, they got some swagger. They're cool. They're working on some exciting stuff, including in 2021.3 the gateway, where you can run everything over on some other machine. Okay, let's go ahead and switch to today's webinar. Let's have some fun. We'd like to make this webinar as live and conversational as possible. So if you have any questions or problems during the webinar, speak up. I'm looking at you right now. Hello, Mexico. Michael's looking over at you too. Michael's a pro. He can do 7 things at once. So engage with us a little bit. We're here to entertain you. You're here to entertain us too. We'll have a few pauses during the webinar where Michael and I will answer questions. We, the PyCharm team, will answer some questions as well. Some of them are already in the chat. And we'll answer them when they come up. Don't wait till the end of the talk. Please ask your questions as soon as you have them. One of the first questions, my constant joke at these things is, someone's going to show up in 5 minutes and ask if this thing's being recorded. So yes, this is being recorded. It's YouTube. It's going to be available basically immediately when we finish, but we will also put up a blog post with a link to the recording. The first half, here's the format for today. Michael takes half, I take half. He's going to do 5 tips. I'm going to do 5 tips, and we're going to riff in between the tips on what we showed. His tips are going to come from this course that Michael has available on his website. Michael, is this going to be part of Black Friday, or you want to keep that secret?
That's a good question. I have not decided what course. That's basically the final thing, and then I push go on it. So
I see some lobbying over in the chat.
Yeah, that might be.
Yeah. So this is Michael's course. Highly encouraged, especially now that it's being updated. But it's wonderful for all of you because you get to hear the sweet, dulcet baritone sounds of Michael Kennedy right in your ears, teaching you effective PyCharm. And then I'll do 5. This is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do a couple that are about how I work. The first one is I shut off all the IDE basically so that I can focus on my code. And then I'll go through some of the other ones later.
Yeah, fantastic. And I'm going to do refactoring, type hints, databases, object-oriented programming, and debugging.
All right, cool. We will get that into the description that we add to the video as well, with all the information about what you're covering, what I'm covering. I believe that we are now all set. So let's go ahead and begin with Michael's first tip.
All right. Well, my first tip has to do with refactoring. And I just love the idea of refactoring so much. Martin Fowler came up with this idea. He wrote a pretty seminal book in 1999 called Refactoring. And that was interesting. And it basically laid out a series of safe steps you could take as a software developer to achieve changing your code in structure without changing its behavior. And tools like PyCharm absolutely just turn that into automation for us. And we're going to see some really great stuff around it. But one of the ideas that he also introduced that I love so much is this idea of code smells. Paul, are you familiar with code smells?
Oh my goodness, yes. This is something talked about a lot, but you know, your smell might be different than mine.
That's right. So a code smell might be a long method, or it might be too many parameters, or even too small of a method, right? These kind of go back and forth. So in that code smell, since we have a smelly podcast app here, let me just run it real quick. And what it does is it goes out to TalkPython and it downloads the last, I don't know, 10 or it looks like more than that, maybe all the episodes. And it parses it apart. It goes to the RSS feed and it basically does some XPath stuff on through the E-tree, and it pulls it out and it gives us information. Okay. So there's a couple of things going on. One, the entire program is just here in main, right? That's a problem. And we're going to use refactoring to move stuff around, to restructure it without changing the behavior. And one of the things that's important to take away from PyCharm is some people will say, oh, I could do this rename, or I could do this other thing in some tool. And what that really might mean is just a find and replace. In PyCharm, this is understanding the abstract syntax tree and safely moving the code where it actually has some important value. Now, the first thing I need to do in order to run this is, you can see I've got like this entire huge blob of code. I need to say, we're just going to focus on this. So I'm going to go down here and say mark directory as sources root, so that if I say something like import system service, rather, like it's relative to just this file here, right? Not this huge directory. And these numbers at the top here mean it actually can't be imported because Python. So get that ready to go. So the first thing to do is, like, should this really be listed all like this? Like, one of the challenges you have is, like, here's a comment that says, oh, we're showing the header. Now we're going to download the data. And now we're going to get the latest show IDs and stuff. In this world of code smells, sometimes you hear you should comment your code, and you should, but these types of comments are really deodorant for code smells. They're trying to pretty up, or, you know, freshen up the bad fact that we have this huge method. So let's start out by saying, you know what, this show header thing, let's go and just go here, and we'll hit Control T and say, just type a little bit for extract methods. I'm going to bust out a couple of methods. You know what we might want to call it? Show the header, like that. So there were no arguments returned or passed there. And so we just get basically a void method, and no arguments and no return value other than the implicit none. So that goes down there to the bottom. That's cool. And now this show the header, that seems silly. Like, who would write that? You don't need that deodorant. So the next one is to download the data. So we're going to go use some quick requests, make sure it worked, do some DOM, and convert this into a dictionary. And actually, I want to move that. I'll move that down here a little bit. I'm just put that a little bit closer. So for this one, I could go over here and just keep going down the line, but actually, I would like this to be a parameter. I like it not to work just for TalkPython, but for all podcasts. So we come down here and we can highlight this, and it'll realize that URL is used here. If I don't pull up that little lightning bolt thing, and we go extract method. It notices that it passes a URL and it returns this episode data. And this is just going to be, well, keep the code smells going, or the comments flowing through, download data. There we go. And here's a cool refactoring. This thing, do we really need this as a separate variable now? I'm not sure we do. Let's just put it inline. So we can come here and say, I would like to inline this variable, and it just puts it straight there. And now we also don't need that. So our code is getting much easier to read. It doesn't need these code smell comments because just read what it says, show the header, download the data. We don't need those twice. So here's another one about getting some of the data. We want the latest and the oldest show. So method, this will be latest ID, I guess we'll call it. It's going to return a tuple. That's always neat. And then we're just going to display the results, which I feel like maybe this is kind of part of that display results. So let's go down here and just say, create a method called display results. All right. Here we go. Now this code is way easier to understand, right? One thing though that is a little bit weird is this program, I feel like it should mostly be about displaying the information and interacting with the user. And this library of talking to RSS feeds and podcasts, I feel like that should actually be its own little reusable library. So notice we have this empty service thing over here. So let's do a few more. Let's go down to get the latest ID. Let's say we'll do the download data first, I guess. We can go down here and say refactor move to service. And it puts it over here. It moves all the imports, and it even does the service bit up there. All right, so that's good. Display results seems like it belongs here. Get latest ID. I think that goes in the service. So let's go refactor move service. Show the header. That one's fine. All right. I think this code is in a much better place. We've got it separated into our service that works with the data, and then the display a little bit here. And final thing though is I don't really want to show it like this. Let's go over here. I'm going to just say I would like to do service, and it says, you know what, we need to import that, and I'll just import it like so. I'll do like this, and I could even say fix this one for me, and it'll put the service on the front. Oh, let's run it. See if it's good. Still works. I guess we refactored it okay because it still does the same thing. All right, that's the first one.
All right, some comments.
Okay.
First, cool to see Lxml getting a little bit of airtime.
Yeah, that's right.
What a great library. I think some of this perspective about refactorings and letting the tool do some of the work for you, and it understands structure, not strings. Maybe some of that comes from your C# background, where
it might be. Yeah, I did do a lot of C# in the early days for sure.
Folks in Python, I don't think when you're the trusted leader in Python training, I suspect a lot of people in Python don't necessarily expect tooling like this. Do you agree?
I absolutely agree that they don't expect it. And I will go farther than that. I would say the tooling people have chosen 10 years ago have influenced what we expect the architecture of Python software to look like. It used to be completely acceptable that you would have a 4,000 line single file with a bunch of classes and a bunch of methods in it. Because you know what? It's really hard to work with more than one file.
That's right.
So we're just going to put it all into this huge file. Like, that is not a good idea. And having lots of structure and the tooling that helps manage that structure seamlessly, I think makes it appealing to do this. So for sure.
And making a little bit of a crossover on this, I also cover web stuff in WebStorm, which is bundled in PyCharm Professional. In the JavaScript world, in the React world, they really believe in single responsibility principle, and they really want you to have one thing in a file. And they want you to export that as the default export, so you don't have to import it by name and stuff like that. So lots and lots of little files, which means that the process of writing in React is you write a big component, split it into smaller pieces. And these refactorings are so helpful.
Yeah. Yeah,
You
they
can
are.
move it out of the component to another component, move it to another file. It will go back and put an import and a usage where you moved it from. And if you change your mind, you do undo and everything goes back the way it was.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that people should embrace is the plasticity of this whole thing, right? It's so easy to make these changes. Instead of trying to overthink the architecture or the design, just fly through it, give it a try to
Mhm.
change it, and then if you don't like the way it's going, change it back, right? Like
Yeah.
it's
In
it's
chat,
not
Catherine's
built in
asking
concrete.
about some of the code smells kind of hooks that can be integrated into your project in Python or even into the IDE, which Corey gives a shout out to the sorcery plugin.
Oh,
Independent of the IDE, there are a lot of Flake 8 and pre-commit kinds of hooks out there that scratch this itch of code complexity, code quality. You want to talk about that real quick?
yeah, sure. I think PyCharm has some built in. I think
Yep.
there's the plugins I've spoken about, like Sorcery. Maybe Tab9 is another to throw a shout
Mhm,
out to.
mhm.
But then, yeah, there's so many libraries. I really feel like Black has just taken over, and
Sure.
for reasons that I think are not as immediately obvious. I think it solves the debate of like, do we write code like this?
Sure.
Or do we have a space like this? Or does the where how to, just like those little things.
I will
And
gladly sacrifice my sovereignty if y'all will just shut up.
exactly, we're all tired of fighting over commas and other stuff. And
Yeah.
if you do like a reformat and you have
Yeah.
a different assessment than I do, like that's um
Sure.
a pendulum swinging back and forth of get diffs that mean nothing other than that you and I don't agree, right? So I think Black
Right.
has come along for that.
Right. Okay. On to the next tip.
All right. The next tip has to do with type inference. So this has to do with a
Ooh,
database thing.
yes.
I love the types so much. And the reason I love them is not necessarily the reason that other people love them. So here we've got a SQL Alchemy project. We've got a SQLite database over here. We've got some classes. And we're going to do a query here. And let me go ahead and just run this thing, see what happens. So this model is like music. And so there's 2 albums, The Year of the Snake and Digital Age Boys and Girls. And then they have some tracks. All right. But check this out. So if I come over here and I go to my albums, let's say here, and I say dot, that autocomplete, Paul, is underwhelming me right now. How do you feel about that? Does that help you discover what you're supposed to do? I think there might be a
No,
name in the
not
tracks, but there's
Paul.
really
Not
not a
at
lot of
all.
not at all, right? And so especially some of these really helpful libraries like SQL Alchemy or SQL Model and other stuff, they kind of play a dual role. So if we go and look at this album over here and we say that this is spelled okay, what is it unhappy about? To do the same mark directory as thing. There we go. Okay. So notice over here, what type is the name? What type is the price? What type is the tracks? There are these descriptors from SQL Alchemy. Check this out. So if I go over here and I say, you know what, these tracks right here, I know the value is that, but check this out. I'm going to say this is a list of track and import that. Now if I go back here and I go to my tracks, oh, it does not yet know what this is. Let's go say that this is actually, because it's coming out of the query, it kind of lost the fact that it came from
Mhm.
album. All right. So let's go and say this is a list of album. And now if I go dot, awesome.
Ah,
So much better. And if I go down to the tracks and I say dot, there's your list stuff. If I pull one of them out and I say dot, here's all the properties, the columns of track. So my tip here was the slightest bit of type hints will completely change your editor development experience. Right? I didn't go down here and type this A. I didn't type the session.
mhm.
There's a lot of places I don't worry about types, but if I do it just a little bit here and just a little bit here, then all of a sudden the editing experience, the development experience is so much better. And so let's go ahead and throw that in for the rest of them. This is what is an int. Got a few ints in here. This one is an int. This one is a bool. I actually had Mike Bayer, the creator of Alchemy, on, and I said, Mike, I do this. Should I be bad? Should I feel bad about doing this? should I not lie to Python that it is a string, but it's not a string? He said, no, a lot of people do this. This is great. So now do a quick reformat. If I come over here, I can go to my A, and if I go to the URL, you can see it knows it's a string. If I go to the ID, it knows it's an int, and so on. So just a little bit, usually on the boundaries of what you're doing, makes all the difference. So type 2, tip 2, use types.
Let's talk about that one a little bit. Python and MyPy and the various type checkers can infer types sometimes pretty well. Sometimes they have to be taught the unique weirdosities of highly dynamic things that use magic strings and stuff like that. And then do the things that you talked about. And I'm with you on that. The benefits of having autocomplete red squiggles when it decides that the API changed over there. It's no longer name, it's first name, all that kind of stuff. In fact, refactoring, go and change name to first name, and all this other stuff that was type aware will go get fixed as well.
Right.
For example, you're typing some of these things right now.
Yeah, it says, look, you can't pass in. And so a lot of people use MyPy and stuff. And for me, if it's enough that it tells the editor to show me the problems, then that's usually enough for me, actually.
So with that in mind, when I did the webinar with Sebastian for Fast API, we got a little bit into SQL model, and he's on a push and others are on a push to try and write new libraries and frameworks that are very, very, very type aware to give a better developer experience for these kinds of things, so that it, like on your line 15, all that type information passes through all of that calling structure.
Right. SQL has a way to kind of strip all information of it somewhere along the way often. And yeah, these new ones are trying to make that better.
Yeah. And I think that's kind of the rise of the smart editor as the kind of baseline developer experience. People are starting to want that kind of thing now.
Yeah, exactly. If you use some terminal-based editor that doesn't really know these things, or even something like Sublime potentially, you don't really care about these features because they don't surface to you. There's no benefit to you, and they're just in your way, like in air quotes, right? They're in your way because I got to now type this junk, even though it does nothing, right? But if all of a sudden,
sure,
like out of this, all of a sudden I don't have to go. So one of my philosophies around programming is I shouldn't really have to go to the documentation almost ever.
Correct. Yeah.
I should be able to, okay, I know I got to create this session, and then here's how to do a query.
Or the source.
Exactly. Or the source, right? I should be able to autocomplete my way mostly through a library, and types are important for that.
For me, I believe in typing a lot just for my own code when I'm on the other side of my code as a consumer of my code in a test.
Yeah. Remind you,
and
like,
then
what was I passing here? Is this an ID or the
I get a
object?
red squiggle telling me that I got it wrong instead of having to run my test.
Yep, absolutely.
All right, onward.
Okay, let's stay with this one for a minute. The next one has to do with database tooling. So there's this database, and it's modeled by these SQL Alchemy models, and that already tells you quite a bit. Like, I can see primary keys and auto-incrementing IDs and all that. This is a very simple database. It has 2 tables, or 3 maybe, compared to real production ones have many, many, many. So I wanted to give a shout out to the tooling over here around understanding the table. So you can see right here, we can come in and say, well, there's these 2 tables. The SQLite master is just like a admin sort of thing for keeping track of what's in that database. So you can go over here and open this up. That's pretty cool. And this gives you all the output. You can even go and change it. And I noticed some interesting things. Like, let's suppose I want to change this. I can change that to 6. And let's dawn of the iterators. Oh, iterators is definitely capital, right? But now notice the color in my little thing here, right? The audio URL is whatever, right? And that color means these are staged changes to the database. If I go and rerun the queries, if I hit this refresh, all that data goes away, or the changes go away. But if I push this, it'll submit those changes. And I can even come over here and say, I would like to see, script this as SQL inserts, right? And copy it to the database, or I could export it and it'll export into either an output file, or I could just copy it. Like here, you can see all those changes right there, right? So super cool ways to deal with this, but let's go ahead and push those to the database. There we go. And now they're in there. So if I rerun it, it'll stick. That's pretty cool. If I wanted to ask questions, I can come over here and say, where's my jump to a query window? One of the things I've always dreaded about SQL is so often many of the tools don't help you. I think people have already got a sense of my love for like tool support, autocomplete support and stuff. So the fact that you have like select and where and all those things, but notice it's not happy to type where right here, because it's like, no, that's not what you write. You write star from, check that out, right? So we can go and run that, and let's see I just need some album ID. So album ID is 1 and 2. We could say from track where album ID equals 2. Run that again, and then you can see we just have the ones that are 2 over here on the right. That's pretty cool, right? But if for some reason I wanted to write this as, I'm not using SQL Alchemy. If I wanted to come down here and just say something like query equals, and I'd write select, right? You're embedding one language into another. Oh, well, right. That's how it goes. Select star from, look at that. In Python, I'm getting autocomplete for my database schema, and the code highlighting inside there, it's the same query, but right, if it even gives me error checking, like it's not album IDs, Michael, just album ID. There you go.
And you can right click on it and run it.
Yep.
So click on execute, yeah.
Is that my console over here? Well, I already have it, so it doesn't really. There we go. Anyway, I think the database tooling is pretty ridiculous, and again, like the injection of autocomplete at the different layers is really, really cool.
And what you talked about at the beginning about refactoring, you can actually refactor the table name or the column name from here in your Python code, and it will go over to your tables and change.
That's awesome. Last thing you can do is you can also visualize it. So if I come in here and say diagrams, show visualization. Now, again, it's not super impressive because it's only 2 tables, but you can still see like, here's the keys. This, there's some kind of uniqueness constraint or something. Here's a foreign key. You can see a lot about it pretty quickly there. All right.
By the way, Michael, I know a guy who's a big fan of this NoSQL database.
I know.
Any chance there's any support for that?
Marketplace. There is.
Well, just the database tool itself, DataGrip.
That's right. That's right. I don't have to add that, do I? I can just go over here and add a database connection, data source, and you guys have MongoDB support. Yeah, that's pretty new, actually.
Yeah.
Let's see. Will it connect? I'm not sure if it's running right now, but anyway.
There was a part where I think you had to download the JDBC driver.
Did I mess it up?
Go to properties.
Properties. There. Yeah, that's right. Download the drivers. You always have to do this, by the way. If you don't know, I had to do this to make the SQLite one to work earlier. Yeah, exactly.
The SQLite one's crazy because you can just double click on a SQLite file or drag and drop it over in the database tool, and it's all all open.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome.
You can drag tables from SQLite to Postgres, and it will create the table in Postgres and then copy all the data to it.
Oh, that's pretty awesome.
Yeah. More magic.
Yeah, I'm not sure I got it working right. Connection failed. I think I got to take away the password or something.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay. But yeah, I absolutely love MongoDB. Cool. I was happy to see that support come in like a year or two ago.
So from the channel, Catherine's asking, she got answered for it, but I'll let you give an answer for it. This kind of database support, does it depend on something in Python like SQL Alchemy or Peewee or anything like that?
No, it's just all Python or all PyCharm.
Yep.
PyCharm is based on like a sort of an amalgamation of the other IDEs, and data grip being one of them. That's just a straight database tool. So no, it doesn't depend on them.
So if you use IntelliJ or any of the other IDEs that have the database tool, it's the same thing. And there's a standalone product called Data Grip that you can get if you want to focus on SQL DevOps.
And this is a paid version.
Yeah, this is the paid. This is part of PyCharm.
Yeah, PyCharm Pro. Okay, I got two more. Do we have time for me to do two more?
Yeah, go.
Quick. All right.
It's your show, man.
Right on. Okay, so we did our two on database things there. One was the types and the other was the database. Let's go talk about the bad wizard. Okay, so here I've got this game. Let's tell it to focus in. All right, let's run this. All right, so there's this sort of D&D inspired game, which lets you have some creatures. You're a wizard. You can see there's a toad of level 1, a tiger level 12. There's a bat. Level 3 has appeared from the dark and foggy forest, and I could either attack it or run away. I've become unsure of my power and fled. Now I can attack the tiger and win. I will probably not beat the dragon. You never know. I've been defeated. Anyway, this game here, it is modeled with objects, classes. So wizard, creature, small animal, dragon, and so on. So I want to play around a little bit with this. Let's go over to all these actors. First of all, when they're all kind of in this one file, it's pretty easy to understand what's happening. So let's go do some refactoring move. I'll call this creature. And let's move this one. Wizard file. Ask again next time. It's going to go to an animals. We'll have more animals. We'll be adding. And then the dragon. That just can be dragon. Correctly. All right. So first of all, does it still run? It does beautifully, because up here we've now automatically gotten all that, which is pretty killer on the refactoring. But let's go and look at this. So this dragon, in other languages, Paul, you gave a shout out to C#. I would write, like, let's go to my creature class. I would write something like, oh, if this is going to be potentially something you could override, I would say virtual. And this one is overriding the object one. So you would say override like this. Clearly, Python doesn't have these ideas, right? But that leads to a problem. When I look at this file, when I look at this class, has anyone actually overridden this? I don't know. Could it be overridden? Should I be concerned about making changes to it? Because other parts of the object hierarchy are potentially using it. Same thing about the get defensive role. And from here, what other part of my program is doing that, right? So there's a bunch of like blue circular bits on the left here, right? So if I go and say, well, all right, what derives from this? I hover over that. It says, is subclass by wizard, small animal, and dragon. That's cool. That's like the entirety of all the things that use this as a base class. If I go here, this is the constructor, initializer, is overridden in Dragon. And this one is actually itself an override of objects, the Python data model, dunderstir or dunderrepper. And then this one is overridden as well by small animal and dragon. So even though we don't have the keywords that make you state what you're doing and be super explicit, like when I'm over in Dragon, I can see, oh, this is not just some function, right? I put it like this. You know, how do you know whether it's coming from a base class or not if you don't have the right editor, right? But if you know, then now and it goes, right? So I can even click on this and navigate backwards and forwards between them and quickly go, okay, well, what is this? All right, let's go back here to this one. All right, well, what is the dragon doing when it overrides it? Okay, it's calling the super, and then it's checking the scaliness of the dragon as part of its defensive fight or whatever. So this object hierarchy navigation is tip number 4.
On this one, it's tempting for people to say, oh, I'm not a meta class programmer in Python. Everyone says that scary stuff, and that's not me. But you might be a consumer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And therefore, you may need to know what are the places I can poke, and having these little gutter decorations is a good way. Hopefully, it's not too noisy.
Yeah.
But it's a way for us to surface that something is possible. We have so much stuff that you just have to know in order to get the value out of that. We've been trying really hard in the last year and a half across the whole company to make sure that if there's something valuable, you'll find it.
Yep, that's good. I mean, there's so many things that it does that are just kind of people don't know about. Yeah.
Like in Django, we put a gutter decoration on a view that lets you navigate to the template for that view. And then when you're in the template, there's a gutter decoration that will take you back to the view for that template.
Yeah, that's fantastic. All right.
Ready
for the final tip?
We've handled everything in chat.
Awesome. So the final one is the debugger. And I want to just put a breakpoint right here in this app. And we can come along here. So a lot of people do print statements for figuring out what's going on in the program. Sometimes that's super helpful. It really shows you a historical step of what happened. But a lot of times you're just like, what is this value? Put a breakpoint, press go. That's pretty awesome. But I would also like to point out that many of the tools that you've seen, for example, you talked about C#, like Visual Studio, you would go into this area, this variables area. Here's the call stack, and I can expando this out here, and I can see like these are my creatures. And if I wanted to know details about the hero, for example, I could go there. But I usually don't even do that because notice up here this gray thing. This is my tip, is the gray thing. Okay. So as you work through the program, as you're coming along, in addition to the values you see down here, you also get them as little, you can't edit them, right? They're not text. They're just part of the debugging output. And I can actually go and click on this and make changes. So like, let's go and set this to be 750. Now Gandalf has a chance. And not do that all the way. So go over here and you'll make changes, right?
And you can set a watch from there as well.
Why is that not taken anyway? Yeah, I can add an inline watch.
So an expression.
Yeah, like so here's the level in addition to that. Nice. I didn't know about the inline watch. That's cool. And down here you can see the active creatures. So during this fight, you can see right now it's a dragon of level 50.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just let it run. Come down the console. And we'll run away because it's a dragon. Bugger. Let it keep going. I'll run away again. Still a dragon. I guess I've got to attack it to make it go away or be defeated by it. But anyway, you can tell like here, what is the last command that I typed? I typed R for run away, right? And just having this stuff right here is it's just fantastic. And so I think the debugger is really cool. People should definitely use the debugger. But this thing about showing it like in line with your code makes it so much easier to get the context like straight away, right? Here's what your creatures are. Here's what your hero details are. Here's what your active creature is. Your last command. To me, that makes debugging even easier. And then also, I guess it's worth noting here. Let's go back and do some steps. If I change it, if I say, let's look around instead, notice that it's now orange, and that means it's changed since the last time you saw it. Whereas the active creature is gray, and the hero is gray because they haven't changed since the last couple of steps.
I did not know that.
Isn't that cool?
Today I learned. All right.
Exactly.
Groovy.
So you can not just tell like what are the values, but how is this overall code on the screen? How is its data changing based on color?
Yeah. Okay, on this one, first, thanks to my fellow developer advocate, Nafil Islam, in chat filing a ticket for someone.
I'm just here to help you find bugs. By the way, I'm pretty certain that if I went down here to the debugger and I go to the hero and I set their level, I'm sure that it'll set it to 750.
Yeah.
And it does. So it's like the little inline thing. Yeah.
The mode that you're in right now, where you actually minimize the debugger, is pretty cool, and trying to get more information in the place where your eyes already were.
Yeah.
So you don't have some other place to look. For the record, you can also detach the debugger window and put it on another monitor, which is what I do.
Yeah.
The WebStorm team is doing some pretty cool stuff on the intersection between debugging and testing, so that they've got other kinds of decorations that appear that you can interact with that pop up an inline rich panel, and you can set debug statements and breakpoints and things like that without going down to that full tool. So if any of you over in chat have any cool ideas about what we could do in the debugger, there are these add-ons that put like comments, a richer set of things that you can do in those gray statements.
Yep. I love them. It's very good stuff.
All right. Let's see. On time, we've got about 15 minutes left. So we will switch over to me and see how I do. I'm by definition going to have to trim off some things
because I took all your time. Sorry,
that I
Paul.
cover. Well, no, I mean, your course is really what people should be thinking about. And so this is just a way for them to understand that there's a lot of value, not just in PyCharm, but in your course. So the first one I'm going to go over, where's a good place to put this? I'll do it down here, is how I get myself set up into my environment. I work for a company that makes an IDE. And the first thing I do is make it not look like an IDE. So I turn off a lot of the Chrome. I turn off that toolbar at the top, the status bar. And then the big one, let's say I go to my Knox file. These things, I think you civilians call them tabs or something like that.
We keep 50 of them open in our web browser.
What's that?
We keep 50 of them open in our web browser.
Yes. And what's the global energy consumption of those 50 tabs multiplied by 7 billion people?
Much.
So I do tab placement none. And I turn off
I love
tab.
the short abbreviated version of that.
Yeah, so that was actually like 3 tips in one. Being able to use actions to set preferences. Some of the things in preferences you don't have to go to if they're just off on kinds of things. So I could search for things in settings or preferences and interact with them. But this whole, our speed search thing, which appears over and over and over, has a little syntax for what you can type to speed through, like top. If I wanted to change the tabs, if I wanted to put it back the way it was, I could do that. If I
Some of the other editors out there have this philosophy of a command palette where you have to pull up a little section and type some bits. Like this is kind of that, right?
Yeah. In fact, let me turn on the Presentation Assistant plugin so you will see the things I'm typing. And so we call that Shift, which is search everywhere. And so this will look in your code. It will look in your preferences. It will look in your IDE actions. It'll look in your database, and it will look in your Git history.
Yeah, so the new PR management within Git was one of the things I considered for a tip as well. That's so good.
Yes. Oh, we've got to do a full treatment of that. Oh, yes. Being able to work on your pull requests from within the IDE. Okay, so that's what I do. I kind of turn off a whole bunch of the IDE Chrome, and then I navigate not by files. I don't use this to navigate. I don't use my mouse. I use other ways to navigate first and foremost, recent files, which is not just recent files, it's also the way I get to the terminal, is a big way that I do navigation. I do kind of forward and backward with the cursor, but the big one I'll talk about in the tip after this next one. So the next thing I wanted to talk about, and Michael, do you got any comments you want to make on the distraction-free turn off tabs kind of mode?
I think it's nice. I think there's a lot of people who really want that distraction-free experience, and they shy away from tools like PyCharm because, like, I can't. There's just too many windows. I can't deal with all this. And so,
yep.
If you
so
want
this
to turn it on,
right here is a pretty lean experience.
Yeah.
I turned off line numbers as well.
Do you have to do like colon Q bang or something to get out? Like, how do you exit this?
To get out of what?
If it's like a VI or whatever.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, I mean, because everything is discoverable through the mouse and menus, it's at least surfaces in some way. You don't need to know some hidden chant.
Yep.
Okay. Next thing, I'm going to talk about how I do development. It's kind of related to the Brian Ocken tribute tour since his updated PyTest book is coming out imminently. Let's say that I got some code I want to work on and it's in this and I know what it is. I don't know where it is. So I'll go ahead and talk about that other mode of navigation. Inject callable, because this is a dependency injector project. And I could try and remember the file and navigate to where it is. Life's too short. Files are dumb. Instead, I can just navigate by symbol. And this is the way that I navigate throughout my code. I turn off tabs. I turn off files and directories. I don't use the mouse. I think about Python software. And I think about symbol names like class names or variable names, or in this case, a function name. And I use that to navigate and turn off tabs, because with tabs, I've got to remember which tab it's in. Well, I know what tab it's in because I don't have any tabs. It's right there. Now, when I'm doing my coding, though, I am a believer in not test-driven development, because that's got a whole bunch of eat your vegetables quality aspect. I'm lazy. I want a lazy way to work, so I do test first. I don't want to have to go over to a browser and click 50 clicks to the universe every time I make a change. How can I do a good testing workflow without tabs? I split right. And then on the right, I'm going to open my test. And here's a test that does inject callable. And I'm going to walk up to it and I'm going to run just that one test. And this is my layout for productive work. I've got my code on the left. I've got my test on the right. I got my test runner at the bottom. And when my brain sees this layout, my brain goes into that comfy, happy place of test first mode. And I stay in the flow. I'm not switching to some console to run PyTest or something like that. In fact, I frequently just put it on auto test mode. And then every 2 seconds, without saving, PyCharm will rerun tests and tell me that I failed. And then I can fix it and not even have to save, because PyCharm's got this virtual file system thingy. And my tests will run and let me know that I'm in good shape.
That's cool. Yeah, so you can turn that on and off, right? The auto run on.
The auto run thing. So I'll put it back in off mode. But what's kind of interesting about it is I can hide this the way you hid the debugger, or I can put it in another window. Another screen. This screen, which is sitting right beside me, which I refer to as my test screen. And then my tests are running over there, and I'll actually get desktop notifications. Actually, let me make this fail. I'll get desktop notifications telling me the results of my test run.
Yeah, very nice.
And since I'm in full screen mode, it appeared on my other window. Oh, no. Actually, I'm not in auto run. So I will rerun that test. And you see the little pop up there telling me my test failed. So that's kind of a test first, not test driven, but test first to try and get into this methodical, carefree mode of development. And then I can use all these techniques, like I can navigate to that symbol. I can say, oh, yeah, but this kind of depended on this thing, this operator called context. And I can go search for that thing and jump to it. And then I can go backwards and forwards. And all of this without having a whole bunch of tabs open and staying in a testing mentality.
I also like if you hold down Control, everything becomes a hyperlink.
Say that again.
If you hold down Control, everything becomes a hyperlink.
Oh, yeah. And you get these little pop-ups that tell you, for one thing, what is the type of the thing that you're sitting on. All right, that's just a mouse over that tells you what it is. It's a string. And then you can click to navigate. Like you just said, it's a hyperlink. Okay, Michael, if there's anything in chat that you think I need to know, I'll let you
Let's see.
But some of the PyCharm folks are answering about it. About Jupyter Notebooks, we are shipping. It's already available in 2021.3 EAP. Greatly reimagined. We spent almost 2 years working in silence on this to have a really professional Jupyter Notebook experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Christian Mueller says, pretty rad, +1 for test first. And
right,
David out there says, turn off a few more things and it'll look like VI. Yeah, that's why I made my fixed it joke.
Okay, that talks about test first. That also talks about the navigating by symbols. And the navigate by symbols matches what Michael talked about kind of at the top about types. And when you put types in, you can start to work with your code in a more symbol Python data structure kind of way, rather than random strings that might be in random files in random directories. Okay, given time constraints, I will hurry just a little bit. I'm going to turn back on the status bar to show something from the upcoming 2021.3 release. Michael, what does that word say?
That it says poetry right there. Look at that.
Poetry.
Quite interesting.
Yes. At long last, we have bundled poetry support like we have pipm support. So project.toml, my pyproject.toml file is driving everything in this project, including not just dependencies, but things like coverage settings and things like that. Previously, we collaborated with a great guy in Japan, Kudai Ano, who had a plugin, a community plugin, and we worked with him to bundle it into PyCharm Community Edition. So that is now available. It's kind of just the beginning. Lots of things that Nafiel and Alexei would like to do with this over time. For example, like WebStorm in package.json lets you autocomplete here and lets you autocomplete here and lets you alt enter to do updates and things like that. We do have some settings in here that you can go into and set warnings for things that might be out of date. And the other part that we want to get better at is if I come over here and I say I want to import Zope, just kidding. If I want to import some package that's out there and I do the alt enter install, we want to make sure we record it correctly in PyProject.toml.
What other systems do you support? Anything like pip env or any of those? I know
we
you do
currently
Conda,
support,
you do standard pip.
Yeah, we support pip and virtual env, Conda, and pip env, and now poetry.
Right on.
All right. And I'm excited about poetry. The team lead for PyCharm, Andrei Vlasovsky, has been working pretty hard to try and get it into a good developer experience, and then start this process of working with community plugins on a more repeatable basis. Okay, that's poetry support. On to the last one. We'll cut this short. Unfortunately, it deserves more attention than it can get. We're going to talk about this thing called HTTP files for testing endpoints. And we're going to talk about a couple of other cool things that are in this release. HTTP files have been here for a while. You might want to use Postman. And Michael, I think you're a big fan of Postman, right?
Postman has been helpful for me. Yeah, it's a way to basically issue arbitrary requests against URLs. Sure. And you might need to do things like set an accept header, or it's easy to do a get often, but if you want to do a post and then set a header and a cookie, then all of a sudden that's not so easy, right?
And it's super valuable, been around for a long time, got a lot of support out in the world. But it does mean switching to another tool, and everyone on your project has to get it set up correctly and all that kind of thing. Wouldn't it be nice, just like we were talking about for testing and running your PyTests and staying in the flow, staying in the tool? Wouldn't it be cool if you could stay in the IDE, get a lot of that IDE integration that you already know, and do REST operations from within the IDE? That's what we have for .http files. So if I went to file new, it would be this HTTP request thing, and it creates a .http file. And from here, each one of these sections are HTTP requests that can be stored in a file under version control and can be run collectively or individually. So I just ran this first one to heroes, and I got a list of the heroes. I got the HTTP headers for the request for the response, and then the JSON data that was returned by my Fast API application. Then it saved it in a file. And this is pretty cool. I could run all the requests in the file, both of these, and you'll see that one of them, let's not do that. One of them said it failed. The second one said that it failed. What was the failure about? It says it has the wrong first name. Well, that was something I put in there. There's this little JavaScripty syntax that you can embed in these endpoint test files that will look at the request response and make assertions. And if any of you have ever seen any of the JavaScript test frameworks, they all look a lot like this. I could have probably replaced that with an arrow function maybe. And what I'm saying is go look in the body, and it's JSON at this point. So I can do kind of a dictionary kind of operation and make sure that heroes 1 has a name of Maria. And if it doesn't, flash up a warning that it's got the wrong first name. All right. So this is pretty cool, but we're going to use this as an excuse to show a couple of other things that we're doing in this release. And along the way, we're going to
before you move on, Paul.
Yeah.
Christian Mueller says, can I inject env variables into that test? And maybe have the port from the URL be configured there.
That's one of the things that you do is you can set an environment that that they will be executing in, and I haven't set up an environment.
Cool. All right, carry on. Also, you have there's a lot of equal on that line there. There's
triple
more
equal.
Yeah. Well, but the font ligatures, I love the font ligatures.
Oh, and you just guaranteed yourself 500 tweets.
I did. I'm going to get some hate mail. Probably written in font ligatures.
There's a strong anti-ligature bias out on the internet. They're like, not only do I not want them, I want you to not want them. So with this, we just proved that something went wrong. So where in my code, this is like something on the front end side that has decided something on the back end side is broken. And so what I want to do is go show what we have to tie the front end and the back end together, something called endpoints, new in 2021.3 PyCharm Professional. I can, in this URL, I can start typing and look at that.
That's pretty sweet.
How did it know that there was an endpoint there. In fact, just to really freak your mind out, in my JavaScript, there's a string in JavaScript, and it knows in the Python side that I have an API defined named heroes.
That is so fantastic. We used to have these crazy XML APIs based on SOAP. There was all sorts of things wrong with them, but one of the things that was nice is they would actually give you a
That's
listing
right.
of what
There's
you could
structure
do.
there.
Right. Yeah.
So what I can do is I can walk up to this and I can treat this like a symbol in Python. I can find all the usages and I can navigate to the thing.
Wow. Is this based off of the open API documentation, the Swagger
Indeed.
stuff? Okay.
This is driven by Open API, aka Swagger, but it's also on our side. Alexei had to teach Michael talked a little bit about the AST, the symbol tree, all that kind of stuff. We had to teach the indexer inside the IDE the structure of Fast API. So we kind of have to adapt the structure of, like, we'd have to do the same thing for the Django ORM and stuff like that. And once it's taught the structure, it can then keep it up to date, index it, and turn these things into symbols, which are then useful anywhere a symbol could be looked at, like a JavaScript URL or that HTTP request file.
I love it.
All right. Now, with that in mind, I'm going to go a little bit further and say, well, where is Maria wrong? So I'm going to navigate to hero. And maybe in this file, I'll see that I've got some sample data. In fact, I do have some sample data. Hero number 1 doesn't have a name of Rusty Man. But what I'd like to do on this, I'm going to go turn back on the status bar and do the navigation bar and do the last little bit of this. I'm actually in a Code with Me session with the great Michael Kennedy live from Portland, Oregon. And he's following along with me. I'm following along with him. Michael, do you see where I just clicked?
I am going to follow you. There we go. Yeah, I see where it says Rusty Man. Okay, yeah, I see you right there.
So, Michael, could you maybe change that to Maria?
This here?
Yeah.
That?
Yeah, change Rusty Man to Maria.
Okay, done.
All right.
I thought I did. Do I maybe need to rejoin? It's been a while.
Possibly. We might have timed out.
Yeah, I think we might have. Let me fire this back up real quick. Hold on.
Oh, yes, you did. So, okay, so Michael did the typing on this. Are you still in the session?
I'm coming back.
All right. Okay, so Michael just joined back, and we can see him type. Yep, exactly. And Michael, can you check and see if this is actually working? Can you click on like the down in services? Can you click on the green run thing again?
Yeah, let's go to services and then run it. And I'm running on my side and I see, oh yeah, 3 or 4 passed. Yeah.
All right.
Nice.
And so with this, we can share editing sessions, but he can also go off on his own and do things on my IDE without me having to watch what he's doing.
I'm in your terminal right now.
What's that?
I'm in your terminal right now.
You're in my terminal right now? All
yeah,
right.
I can go through and explore the machine and like
Look
everything
that I can go. I'll go to that terminal too.
Yeah, there we go.
All right.
Yeah, so it's not just I get access to your code, but I get access to your infrastructure and everything I might need to run it, right? If you've got like
because I enabled the permissions that gave him full access.
You got a lot of faith.
I could have just given him read-only access or something like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll kind of wrap up here on this one. This one showed the HTTP file support, which is a great way to not have to switch to Postman, but also this endpoints thing, which in 2022, we're going to infer structure from APIs and make them available to all that IDE machinery that you already know about, that Michael showed you, refactor, rename, and navigation, and jump to, and jump back, and all those find usages and stuff like that. And then finally, our remote story. We've been cooking as a company. We've been cooking on this for a long time. Code with Me has been out this year. We also have this thing called Gateway, which is coming out in beta. It's available now, where all of it runs on a remote machine. And even in places where we haven't wired it up, we can run swing dialogues over the wire. It's all pretty exciting. Michael, anything you want to add on that?
I'm very excited about that. I think like I said, the remote Code with Me stuff, pretty neat. You also have like Docker integration for running and debugging into Docker containers and other types of things. There's a whole bunch of stuff.
Amazon has a cool AWS plugin that integrates a bunch of AWS services into our IDEs as well.
Yep, indeed.
All right, let me take a quick glance over. Let's see.
Kay out there said, wow, that's great in regard to understanding the API structure, the / heroes thing. And then Catherine said, thanks, Paul and Michael. This has met my high hopes. Thank you, Catherine. That's awesome. Thanks for being here.
And hope to see Catherine sometime in 2022. All right. Hopefully in Pittsburgh, right? Or in Salt Lake City.
Salt Lake City.
All right. You going?
90%. Very likely
90%.
going. Yeah.
All right. All right. We will go ahead and start the process of wrapping up a little bit. Before we wrap up, Michael, what's the next big course or initiative for you?
Oh my gosh. The next big course, maybe some Django stuff. It might be time to do some Django things.
Django 4, baby.
Got some more Fast API stuff coming along. Fast API is a bunch of cool extensions and whatnot. And I think that those need some coverage. So there's 2. And I'm now seeing some nice integration that I could add here.
All right. And maybe you'll release that Fast API template thing of yours.
Yeah.
Actually, it's released.
Yeah.
Okay. So thank you a bunch, Michael, for joining us on this kind of, I'll call it the being a PyCharm badass extravaganza. And once again, everyone, if you really crave listening to the voice of Michael Kennedy, as do we all, please head over to Talk Python Training, take a look at the catalog, and imagine getting 8-hour doses on the topics you want to know, but don't.
Thanks, Paul.
If you like more, go ahead, Michael. Sorry.
No, I just said thanks for the shout out.
Yep. We all know to listen to you on Talk Python Training and Python Bytes, but everyone should remember, if you want to learn something in Python, the place to go for that is Talk Python Training. Your courses are just so well done. You take the extra time to save everyone else's time. So I appreciate it. If you'd like to get more information on PyCharm, please go to our website at jetbrains.com/PyCharm. If you haven't already, check out our blog. Things are going to get pretty interesting on the blog in the next week. Just saying. You'll find up-to-date information about PyCharm news and releases and events such as this, in addition to educational resources that we put out. We'd love to have your feedback on this webinar, so feel free to contact us on Twitter. If you do, chances are pretty good Nafi or me will be the ones to answer you. Or in the after webinar survey, we actually look at those things and find out what we could do better, what you liked, what you didn't like.
Yeah.
Before wrapping up, Michael, you got any closing words?
I think there's tools like PyCharm that we saw here that really allow people to take full advantage of that entire ecosystem, right? I talked about I learned Python. It was a great weekend, right? You can go so much beyond that. And things like this fast API integration, the database integration, all those things just make it keep going smooth.
Yep. All right. So that's all for us today. Thank you to our esteemed and repeat guest, Michael. 3 more tickets punched and you get a free sub sandwich.
Right on.
And even more, our esteemed viewers. Thank you for joining us today. Hope you have a nice day.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.